Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Stover, licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're listening to the Modern Day Romantic Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we have our first expert interview on the podcast. I'm very excited for it. I'm going to go ahead and read her introduction, and then I'll bring her on to join us. So Dorena Kohrs, better known as the Space Doula, has spent nearly 2 decades exploring the fusion of Feng Shui, space clearing, and intuitive coaching to shift momentum in people's lives. She serves her clients by offering soulful practices to get unstuck and out of mediocrity by using their homes to unlock their limitless potential. Whether they're feeling unheard or tired of putting themselves last, Dorena helps them shift the energy within their homes, bringing alignment to themselves, their family, and their career. Her work has been featured in Better Homes and Garden, Yoga Journal, and on podcasts, including Hay House Radio and Unity Radio. She has spoken about how to use your home to shift the energy in your life on numerous stages, including the 2019 Lynn Academy Ancient Secrets, Present Alchemy International Conference, and the 2021 annual conference of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. Dorena is a certified practitioner of interior alignment, a certified clutter clearing coach in the Lynn Method, and a soul coaching practitioner. So without further ado, let's welcome Dorena Kohrs. I think it'd be great to just hear a little bit about you, your background, kind of how you got into this to begin with.
You know, it's a little bit of a storied, I think, like all of us, journey. And I often say I was, when I look at astrologically, I was born to do what I do. I have so much Cancerian energy in my astrology chart that just screams home and comfort and nurturing. But I really, I play in the world of Feng Shui, but before I even knew, I was probably 7, 8 years old. And, at that time was in a fairly dysfunctional, chaotic home environment. And I had this craving to feel safe. And so I was in my room a lot, and I just was constantly moving my furniture around to find where it felt good. So I've always had this instinctual ability to know when my space feels good. So that's really where it started. Fast forward, I was the one going into college where I wanted to decorate everybody's dorm room and tell them how, what to bring and how to arrange it and how to make it feel like home. I had a short stint in marketing, and then I had the opportunity to go back to my true love of working in homes. I was a partner in a decorating company. I was a professional organizer. I was a house cleaner for a while. I'm a certified clutter clearing coach. And with each of these, there was always this desire to get underneath, always a desire to see, why weren't people wanting to let go? Where was that resistance? And so when I brought in formally the Feng Shui aspect, it finally was this aha, oh, now I see how our homes mirror our lives. And when I could start seeing what our homes say and what they say about us, this entire world opened up, because I could show people how their homes are reflecting what's going on in their life. And then when you can see it, when you can see something, you can't unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was just telling people oh, you just need to let go of this clutter, they'd be like, well, why? And it's not simply just letting go of something, it's understanding why we're holding on to it. So the Feng Shui piece really helped me see that, and really opened up a lot.
That's so fascinating. Wow. There's so many directions I want to go from that. If we're thinking about the romantics of the world, particularly, so I know that your work can focus on all sorts of aspects of a person's life, but particularly for those that maybe identify as being romantics, where relationship is a really a key core component of who they are and what they're desiring and looking for. One thing I always think that's important to say is that it's not just about relationship with, another person, but also relationship with yourself as well. So I'm just kind of curious, with relationship being a theme in there, and let's just say you had a client and that was an area they wanted to focus on. And of course, it all depends, doesn't it? Whether they're already in partnership or not. But if we're really focusing on that relationship with oneself, where might be some places you would start, or just some things for people to be mindful of?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and something that, so many of us focus on. I'm, the hopeful romantic, and so I'm always looking at bringing that into my space. Um, the first thing, and you touch upon that, it's always, starts with us, right? And so what's our relationship with ourselves? And I've had clients before where I've been in their homes either virtually or in person, and I'd be like, where are you? Like, I can't, like, a lot of this is
Mm.
energy work, right? But I'm like, I can't feel you here. I can't see your personality here. And so that's really the first place to start. And one of the things I really focus on, kind of my zone of genius, is really looking at the metaphors, and if you were to say, if this were a metaphor for my life, what would it be? So your bedroom is actually a metaphor for your inner self. So,
Mm.
or it's
Mm.
associated from a Feng Shui perspective, it's associated with your inner self. So if you walk into your bedroom right now and you said, okay, if this was a metaphor for my inner self, what is it? What is this saying about me, and how I view myself? And so often we focus on the public places, right? So we dive into like, especially like post COVID, when, we are inviting more people into our homes, or they are becoming more, family or whatnot, that we focus on the kitchen and the living room, and we want those spaces to be neat. And then our bedrooms become this dumping ground. But
Mhm.
really, though, that's like the first place that I always want my clients to focus on, is looking at your bedroom and saying, like, how can I honor myself? How can this be a sacred space? So that's, and how do I bring me into the space?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's the first, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then after that, we can, like, okay, now let's look at partnership. How do we bring partnership into this? So a couple different places is one. Let's start, we're just talking about the bedroom. Let's stay there. Is there space for a partner, right? So if you don't
Mhm.
have a partner in your life and you want to attract one, is there actually space for a partner? So some of the things you can do is make sure, like, I'm a big nightstand person. Like, do you have two nightstands, right? We want partnership to be balanced. Um,
Mhm.
and so we often look in our space, and especially if I'm looking at somebody's bedroom, I'll never forget, I had a client, and she was actually currently separated from her spouse and wanting to work things out. And when I went in their bedroom, she had this like tiny petite glass nightstand, and then on his side of this bed was literally a steamer trunk
Oh.
that was his grandfather's. And so
Uh-huh.
that's the other thing, we look at, is like, what ancestral things have we brought into our into our homes, because everything has energy.
Mhm.
And what energy are we bringing up? What patterns from our past are we bringing into our present and into our future? So it's so interesting when I see this, and she didn't feel seen, right? She didn't feel seen in her marriage. And to see like how domineering physically the space was with his big huge steamer trunk, and not coincidentally the patterns that he was repeating from the male side of his family. And those patterns were what were getting in the way of their marriage. And so that was a fascinating, notice, another metaphor, right? So
Mhm.
that's the first base. We have two nightstands, like, balanced, and they don't have to be identical, right? You don't need to be the same as your partner, but, and you can speak to this and have been, I mean, like, but where do we want to balance, right? We want to be heard and seen on both
Mhm.
sides.
Mhm. Yes, before you brought in the family heirloom piece, that's where my mind was going as a marriage and family therapist. I trained to think systemically, look at intergenerational patterns. I was even thinking about how, I don't know if it's such a thing so much today, but I know in the past where, newlyweds would be gifted like a bedroom suit from maybe one of the sets of parents, or maybe even like given a hand-me-down, from their parents. Hey, here's this like for your starter home or something like that. So I was thinking about, Yeah, that's so interesting to think about. And it's not that, hey, if you're sleeping on furniture that you didn't pick out or that was given to you, that that's necessarily this bad thing, but it's something to be mindful of. How do you feel about that? Would you say that? I mean, like, so that example, like someone sleeping on, their parents' old bed or something like that. Are those the types of things that you ask them to consider and reflect on?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's so like the energy of an object is based upon a number of things. So it's based upon where it came from, our memories of it, our association with it, how it was made, so something made um, by a craftsman, an artisan, versus something made in a
Hmm.
factory where
Mhm.
there's not, the labor practices are not ideal. So those two objects are going to have totally different energy. Something you buy at your local farmer's market versus something you buy in a big box store, those are going to have different energy. So where something came from, so this bedroom suite, where it came from matters. So was it your grandparents and it's being passed down? And then an interesting question is, what was their relationship,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
if it is a piece of furniture that's passed down to you, particularly like your example, something like a bedroom suite, and let's say it was ancestral that somebody else slept in. Um, what was their relationship like? And is that something you want to emulate? Or is that like, oh my gosh, they were fighting all the time. It was horrible. Like that's
Mhm.
not the energy you want to bring into your partnership. So to be cognizant of that is really important. And then let me just touch upon, I mean, there's so many like different directions we can go and try to, um, but what's underneath your bed, right?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
energy of what's underneath your bed is so important. And I had actually a friend, this was several months ago, probably 6, 7 months ago, and we hadn't seen each other for a while, and we went for a walk, and she was engaged. And so we were talking, she's like, what should I do in my home? And so we were talking about the bed, and she's like, I have my wedding dress from my
Ugh,
first marriage. And I'm like, where is it? And she's like, under my bed. And her fiance were fighting, like they were like
yeah.
about ready to get married. And she's like, gosh, things have really been stirred up lately. And I'm like, okay, the energy of your first marriage is literally underneath where you're sleeping.
Mhm.
So to I always talk to my clients about we need to let go before like we subtract. I talk about it in some mathematical terms. It's like, what do you need to release? What do you need to subtract from your space before you can add? So, what do you need to subtract from past relationships before you bring in a new one?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that brings to mind, cases where there's a divorce and one person stays in the house and the other moves out. And if you're in that, situation and eventually wanting to or ready or but maybe you can't move on because maybe everything is still the same. Every day is just this is really good to reflect on. Like, what do I need to change in order to align this space to my life now in order to maybe
Mhm.
reclaim it and then allow it to be the canvas for something new to be painted or created that you'd like to draw in.
Absolutely. It's in the circumstance of a divorce or separation, it's so important to shift your space. And when you can't, if you can't physically move, that's okay. But how can you change the energy of the space? So things like, I had one client who's like, every time I see the chair in that space, all I could think of is my husband sitting there, and not being supportive, not helping, so, and I'm like, okay, well, let's move the furniture around.
Hmm.
Right? So it doesn't have to be, you don't even have to go buy new furniture, but even to rearrange the furniture in a space just to change the energetic pattern. Going in your pantry and saying, okay, I never liked curry and I've got curry powder in here, but that's what my partner always, so
Yeah.
whatever it is, or you know, removing those things from your space or shifting them to change anything. I do want to note, like, if you have children, though, that is a huge consideration, right? So being cognizant of their age and how much you change. Um, I would say in that circumstance, change your bedroom, though, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that being your intimate space. I remember when I went through my divorce, like the first thing I did was buy new sheets. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to ask anybody. I got to pick the purple flower sheets, so like like pick the space that you have 100% control over, and change that. And again, just staying on the bedroom is, what photos do you have? So I feel like we're throwing tidbits all over the place.
Yeah.
This may be a take your notes kind of podcast. Look at the pictures in your bedroom. So if you aren't partnered, you don't want pictures of your children in your bedroom. I know they're cute, I know they're adorable, and I know you love them. However, we have this no eyes rule in Feng Shui, not rule, but suggestion about no eyes in the bedroom. So do you want your kids in the middle of your intimate relationships? So you have a whole other spaces in your home, display them there, but not to have them in your bedroom would be ideal. And then also, if you have recently divorced or separated, you really want photos that feel authentic. And so if you have kids, it doesn't necessarily mean stripping the entire house. Again, this is it's going to be different for every person. I would definitely say take those photos out of your bedroom, but having, in your kids' bedroom, if they want a picture of the family, or a lot of times I'll suggest like having a picture of the mom and dad, or the mom and child, and then the dad and the child,
Mm.
so that it is a true representation. But they're both there and they're both honored. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very profound. That's a way to have that inclusion without kind of sending the message, that maybe the parent there, like their stomach tightens or something, or it brings a lot of pain. It's like, that's fact. That's reality. This is your parent and this is your parent. And it can be an inclusive space, but send a different message, about the couple. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it could be like a slow transition, right? So, if this happened last week, to take everything off the walls could be very destabilizing for a younger child. So it, first out of your bedroom, then maybe out some public spaces, but of a family picture, right? And again, depending
Mm-hmm.
upon the circumstances, but really you want your space to honor who you are and who you are becoming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not being living in a past or something that doesn't feel authentic.
That's kind of another place that's opening inside of me as I'm listening to you, which is, self-development and transformation happening and occurring through time. So who we are today is probably not going to be the same as who we are 5 years from now. I mean, yes, the essence, but we're always evolving, changing. The opportunity is there to grow and develop. So I'm thinking about how this is probably a dynamic process through time, that you get the bedroom set up and yes, this is exactly the way I want it right now. But that doesn't mean this is the way it will be forever and always, like that this exact setup will serve me, for the rest of my life. And just being able to
Mm-hmm.
self-reflect and tap in and say, something is shifting inside of me. And how can I make a change in the space to support me, or kind of what's causing a friction or irritation, in the space. Maybe it's metaphorically or symbolically representing something that needs to change. So I'm just thinking about that, development occurring through time, and that this isn't thinking about those design shows, on HGTV and various things. So you go in and you make all these changes, but eventually that's going to be out of style, or you're going to need to change it again. So it's not just like a one and done thing, that there needs to be that expectation and room for growth through time.
100%. It is never once and done. And I think with our homes, we tend to do that. We tend to be like, wow, I haven't changed anything. And it doesn't have to be big changes, right? It doesn't have to be massive renovations or, totally redecorating. But you want your space. Let's just take your closet, for example, right? Like, do the clothes in your closet reflect who you are today?
Mm-hmm.
So my corporate suits when I worked for American Express don't, I mean, one, they wouldn't fit anymore, but two, it's not what I wear, right? It's not what I wear in my current my current job. So really wanting your space to evolve as you do. And one of the things which we haven't touched upon, but there's in Feng Shui, it's called the Bagua map, and it's an energy map, and it shows you what area of your home is associated with what area of your life. And a lot of times this map is a square tic-tac-toe board, and you overlay it on your floor plan. And our homes aren't square. So sometimes what people will discover is that, oh my gosh, my relationship area is cut out, right? Like, oh my gosh, that means my relationship, I'm never going to have a relationship. And I'm like, no, there's no wrong homes, right? There's only homes that we are attracted to, that we are drawn to help our soul evolve. And so if the relationship area of your home is what we'll call cut out, then it's an opportunity to focus more energy in that space and be more creative with that. So that's definitely, it's a constant evolution. And, and our home's always teaching us, and we're always in conversation with it. So it's listening, it's understanding its language. And when we start like pushing up against our edges, a lot of times something will happen in our home. And I'm like, okay. So for instance, I recently spent the summer, I was a guest speaker in my mentor's program, and it was like over 1,000 people in this program. I was like, wow, I hadn't presented to that large of a group before. And I set the intention of showing up. I'm like, I'm going to show up for my presentations, and I'm going to play full out. And I did. And at the end of that month, we had a house flood. Like a house flood beyond all house floods.
Wow. Yeah.
And so then I had to start saying, okay, what does this mean? And water and Feng Shui is associated with emotions. And we actually had mold and had to go through mold remediation. And what happens when water's emotions are stagnant, right? When we don't process our emotions. And then what happens when water sits stagnant? And so I had the opportunity for the past 4 months to really dig into fear as one of those emotions that spilled out. And what was interesting, it did show up in my relationship. And this was a way, this whole process of deconstruction and reconstruction of my home helped my soul evolve higher, helped my relationship with my husband evolve. So our homes just have an amazing way to show us where the work needs to be done, and it gives us the opportunity to make the changes.
Wow. You can't make that up, huh? That's interesting. Very fascinating. So one thing that also, as you were talking then, I was kind of wondering what you think about when people feel like they need to move homes, like change the whole house that they're living in. And I can imagine, let's say like a couple and children are growing, and maybe you do need more physical space. But I'm just wondering, like with your work, if at times it's maybe there are changes they could make within the home, creative options available to them, as opposed to picking up and just moving elsewhere with maybe all the same possessions, furniture, belongings, those types of things. But yeah, what would you say, especially with this house being this living entity and this mirror back to us, this kind of decision or choice as to whether or not to move homes versus explore and experiment in making changes in the home that we're currently residing in?
It's an interesting question, because a lot of times I'll have somebody come to me and say, well, I'm going to move, so let's talk after I move. And I'm like, oh, no, like, let's talk now. And the reason I want to have the conversation now and I want to look at their homes is because I want to see the patterns before they move. Because just like, the old adage, wherever you
go, there you are.
There you are. So if you don't identify the subconscious patterns, you will take them into your new home. So I had a client who she said, I've been trying to move for 8 years. And I'm like, okay, let's actually do the work in your home. Let's identify the patterns. Let's see where we have to shift. And what happened is, like, immediately the opportunity opened for her to move. And so you might say, well, geez, why did we spend all this time on this home? But the opportunity wouldn't have happened if she wouldn't have processed and understood the lessons that she needed to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you're wanting to move and it's happening, great, right? I wanted to move a couple years ago. This is kind of right before COVID. We were going to move, and we wanted to move to a home where we could have my mom live with us. And we looked and we looked and we looked, and every time the door closed, it was like, what in the world is going on? And so when a door keeps closing, I'm like, okay, we're not meant to do this. And it
Mm-hmm.
became very obvious shortly thereafter of why that living situation wouldn't have been good for her, for us. So that's one, is kind of, if you're looking to move and the doors are opening, yeah, go ahead, right? But if they're not, or you're not able to, it's really understanding your home and making the changes, like not waiting for your home to be ideal, making it the way you want it now. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Um, if you want to live at the beach, right? Then bring the artwork, bring the feeling of the beach there. And back to romantics, if you want to be in partnership, then make your space feel like it's in partnership. So kind of, let's circle back around to the beginning of our conversation, having the 2 nightstands, having some space in your closet. I remember when I was single, the other half of my bed was my laundry pile. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally there would have been no space in that bed except for my laundry,
Yeah.
and that I hadn't folded yet, right? So do you have stuffed animals all over your bed? Like, is there room in your bed? Is there room in your closet? A little room in your bathroom? Like, make space with the intention of somebody else. And then look in your space about partnership. Like, do you have a lot of single objects in your home? Like, that's fascinating. Or single, like, I had one client who, here's just a little bird's eye into the Bagua map. If you're standing at your front door and you're looking in, so it's like you're about ready to walk in through your front door, your back right corner of your home is the relationship area.
Mm.
So when I looked at her back right corner, there was one of those huge metal stars, the kind of like the artwork, those big metal
Yes.
ones. And then there was a small one. So I'm
Mm.
like, oh,
Who's going to be the star? Uh-huh.
right. And that's very much how their relationship was. So don't wait to set up your home for partnerships. Set it up now. Don't wait to create that home at the beach. Create that beach feeling in your home. Like, bring what you want into it now. And then you'll see that you'll start, like, it becomes like a vision board, right? Your home can be a living vision board for what you want to attract. Do subdued lighting, have candles for the romantics, play with lights, play with candles, have the music on, um, using darker colors, softer, like soft pillows, soft throws. Those will all bring in that more feminine energy, that more romantic, sensual energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking too, like maybe you have space in the closet for clothing, like the partner's clothing, or just you have a placemats for 2 or something like that. Like you're just anticipating them being there with you.
Exactly, exactly. So that when you look at your space, it looks like 2 people belong there.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe the final thing we can touch on here is, so let's say this is where a romantic's at and they set up the space and then they attract in or find a partner. What would you say when they start to, maybe they decide to move in together? Because again, that's that kind of transitional, maybe the space can't stay the exact same way it was when one person was living there. Even if it were set up for 2, I would imagine that the other person needs to have some of their things, their possessions, their belongings brought in too. So I don't know, what would you say in a situation like that?
Um, it can be tricky.
Yeah,
It can certainly be
that's what I was
tricky
thinking.
if you are moving into their space or they're moving into your space.
Mhm.
Um, Especially if you lived in that space with somebody else. and really wanting to clear that, looking at the furniture that's there, and again, you may not be able to do it all at once, looking at the artwork. I had a client who she hired me actually when I was solely doing clutter clearing work. And I was actually only at the time working with people going through a divorce. And by the time I got there, I was like, you've let go of everything. Like, why did you call me? You don't need me. Um, and I have a strong intuition as part of what I do, and I'm walking through the space, and like Sesame Street is like one of these things doesn't belong with the other. I
Yeah.
walked into a space and I was like, wow, that doesn't feel like it belongs. And so I'll say, I'm like, tell me about that painting. And she's like, that was my soon to be ex-husband's, and it was a painting from his honeymoon. So there weren't any people in there, but it was a photograph taken on his honeymoon from not their marriage, a
Wow.
previous marriage.
Wow.
So not only had that come into their space,
Mm-hmm.
she had forgotten to take it down. So first, the subtraction piece, right? Like, what do you need to remove from any past relationships that you're no longer vibing with? And then really being open to allowing your space to change to reflect both of you. When my husband moved into my space after we got married, and it was a house I bought myself. It was my first house I'd ever bought. I was super proud, super possessive. And thank goodness he's a patient man, because I'm like, you can have this much space.
Right.
You can you have to fit into our rules. And that, again, if he wasn't as patient as he was, that would not have been so ideal. So really opening your mind and making the space emotionally, physically for that person.
Yes. And just staying curious as to why am I so attached to this, or subconsciously, as you say, or why do I just kind of see that, but look over it each time I look at that picture, for example, that you just mentioned from her ex-husband's honeymoon with someone, it's like that just,
right.
It's there, but not there, so that's just so interesting. I just love your work. I think everyone could use a you in their life. This is so fascinating.
Well, I needed a me in my life. I literally had to put my professional hat on, because the other piece of this is we had one project this summer that we wanted to accomplish, and our back deck, which is in the relationship area of our home, was crumbling. Like, boards were rotten. And I'm like, oh, we really need to fix that. And what happened instead was the flood. And we were both able to look at our fears individually, collectively, and really work through those and work through together. There's so many lessons in the whole thing, but it's really fascinating work when you really dive into it. And also looking at, I had a client who, the one with the stars, actually, we looked at her home through a whole process, and there was a painting there from her first husband that he had actually painted. So lots of his energy in it, because he had created this, and it was on her side of the bed in her new marriage, in her bedroom where she had just, and I said to her, what did you have in that relationship that you don't have in this one?
Wow.
And that opened up so much that she was then able to process with somebody like you, and said, okay, then we can remove the physical piece. But what this door opens is things to bring to you.
Yeah.
To work through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for your time today. It always gets my wheels spinning whenever I learn about your work and talk with you. So thank you so much for allowing me to interview you, coming onto the podcast. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to say thanks again to Dorena Kohrs, the Space Doula, for stopping by and having this conversation with me. If you like her work, are interested in learning more about her, I will have all of her contact information and ways to get in touch and learn more about her in the show notes. And I look forward to seeing you next episode. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you're interested in learning about ways to work with me, head over to my website, themodernDayRomantic.com. unstuck.com. From there, you'll be able to contact me and learn a bit more about the customized intensives and retreats I offer both individuals and couples. You'll also be able to support future podcast production via Patreon. There are several membership levels to choose from, including the Beating Hearts Club, which gives you access to exclusive content every month. Thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you next episode.